Hi everyone, this is Nick O'Malley here with Tom Westerholm, making a guest appearance on our Celtics page to break down the current state of the Celtics and what's going on with them in their current wave of events after the All-Star break, especially after their big win against the Bulls last night. Tom, what were your first impressions of that win?
Well, the Bulls are bad. In fact, horrible at basketball. They're just a terrible team. No defense whatsoever. I mean, it was tough to watch at times. The Celtics were just completely doing whatever they wanted. They could get anything they wanted in the pick and roll. Defensively, they were flying around the court, and that was, that's kind of been a theme since the All-Star break, is that they fly all over the court. They're playing great defense again, and against that Bulls offense, it was just way too much. Celtics looked really good. The Bulls looked really bad, and it was one of those nights where it's like you can't take too much away because the Bulls are really bad, but also the Celtics are back to being really good again.
Yeah, one of the biggest things we took away from last night, and the main topic we're getting to right away, is al-Horford, who had that real rough finish to the Rockets game, but came out in the Bulls game. And what did you think of his performance?
So again, Horford just really all over the floor defensively. If you watch the game and you kind of look at why the Celtics were so dominant, it was a lot because Horford was everywhere. He was making great rotations. He was getting out to three-point shooters. That's really important when you're playing a team with Lowry Markkanen, as one of the stretch bigs. And Horford was getting out to contest him, forced a couple of turnovers, got a dunk and transition off of that. So he still had, I think he had 13 points, but he was plus 31 for the game. And obviously all the starters were plus quite a bit because that Bulls team is terrible. But Horford was really good offensively. He spread the floor. He kind of facilitated everything. He was just back to being that normal Al Horford that he usually is, which is a really good player. And that's one of the things I think we wanted to touch on, was how there's been kind of this narrative, and we're not going to get into it too much as far as how that's getting around, but this average Al narrative that's going around. And it's just so intellectually dishonest because it forces you every time that you think that he's had like a mediocre game to be like, well, that there's a point there that, maybe he is average, and that's just not the case. Like that, he just makes everybody else better. That's how he plays. If he has an off game, he still can make everybody else better. And I just think that this like average Al sort of narrative, it's dumb and it doesn't really fit. And the Celtics team would just be a lot worse if he wasn't on the floor.
Yeah, it's such a weird sort of nickname because he's such like a rare talent in that like he just spreads so many things to his teammates and makes everything on the court better. They say average Al. I think that maybe a better nickname would be doesn't take over games offensively Al. I doesn't quite roll off the tongue quite as well. Doesn't
quite. Maybe Defensive Player of the Year Al. I think that's still on the table at this point. Especially if the Celtics finish the season with the best defense in the NBA, which is that they're pretty comfortably at that point. And he's such a huge part of that. He's I think the main focus of that defensively, just everything that he brings to this team. So yeah, I think average Al really does roll off the tongue, which is unfortunate because it is not in any way accurate or fair.
So one other big that we wanted to talk about and had a good game last night was Greg-Monroe, who's had sort of like a wobbly start to the Celtics, but in the past couple games you're starting to see what he can do offensively for this team. What takeaways from last night's game do you think can sort of be projected to down the road for this team?
Well, again, and I'll say this for the last time this video, that you can't take too much away from last night's game because the Bulls were terrible. We'll just move on from there. But one thing that we're seeing from Monroe is that he's starting to really get a flow of the offense. He's starting to kind of see how the Celtics want to use him. Stevens early on, I think it was after the DNP-CD that he got, and I think his like third or fourth game, said, Monroe's a smart guy. He's got a high IQ. He's going to start to figure things out. And Stevens was actually talking about the defensive end, where Monroe isn't particularly talented because he's kind of slow-footed. But you can start to see that Monroe is figuring out the rotations. He doesn't always close out, as fast as he needs to. He doesn't always, cover the pick and roll quite the way the Celtics would like. He's not Al Horford. It is what it is. But he's starting to be in the right places. That's all they can ask for at this point. He's grabbing a lot of rebounds. He can hit the offensive glass. And, one of the things the Celtics wanted from him was to be able to dump the ball into somebody and get a bucket, in an ISO situation. And they don't go to that often. Stevens isn't a particularly, post-ISO type of coach. But when they do go to that, he does a pretty good job of, getting a good shot, using his soft touch, using his footwork. And that's, having that extra look is important going into the postseason.
Yeah, the old school kind of throw it in down low and pound it out and establish a post presence. It's not the top priority for the Celtics, but it's something nice to have.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, and honestly, the more looks you have as a team, the better off you're going to be. If you can spread it around to all the different shooters, that's great. If you can spread it around to all the different shooters and you can dump it down low, that's just an extra thing, you know. And to Monroe's credit, he's a good passer, and so he can take advantage of having kind of that spread offense. If everything's collapsing in on him, you know, we saw it against the Hornets. You know, he just tortured Hernangomez, and you know they had to make an adjustment because Hernangomez had no answer for him, and that's where it's really valuable. Is if you can make a defense change the way it's defending you, then you make them get into adjustments, and then you kind of have an advantage.
So the Celtics had this huge blowout of the Bulls, and the weird thing is they did that without Kyrie Irving, which is the weirdest thing about this blowout win. It's sort of viewed as a short-term injury. Do you think it's going to be something that's going to be kind of in the rearview mirror a week or so from now, or is this something that's going to be an issue going forward?
So I think it's a little concerning. I think that, you know, this is something that was reported by Cleveland.com, that this is something that he might have to have surgery on, or that I think they reported that he will have to have surgery on it eventually. Obviously, he can keep playing without, you know, maybe it being a concern going forward that he's not necessarily, you know, furthering his risk of you know, intense injury. But I do think that it's a little concerning, especially when you look at that Rockets game where it was pretty clear that he wasn't 100%. He wasn't playing particularly well. Down the stretch, he missed some shots that he usually would hit. And I just think that is that's concerning for the Celtics, because if they get into the postseason and they get to a place where, you know, this injury that's going to be kind of hanging around for a while, and that has hung around for a while, reportedly since 2015 when he had to leave the finals early. If that's still hanging around and he's still kind of got that hanging over his head, I think that, you know, that's not a good thing. That's something that you really want to avoid. And it's good that he's taking these precautions. It's good that the Celtics are letting him sit out games like, you know, the Chicago game. And it's good that they're only playing him, you know, 32, 33, you know, minutes a game. But I do think that, you know, it's not something to be panicked about, but I do think it's something to keep an eye on and something to, you know, maybe a little bit concerned about.
Now, he's not getting those Jimmy Butler minutes, but do you think there's going to be a point where Brad Stevens and the coaching staff, once the playoff situation starts to crystallize and thinks, hey, like 10 games to go or whatever it is as we start to get to that stretch run, as we get close, do you think the Celtics are going to give him a bit more rest? Like, would it be worth saying, like, oh, if we go from like the 2 to the 3 seed in the East, but Kyrie gets 3 games of rest? Do you think they take that trade?
Well, I think the good thing for the Celtics is that there's not really any way they go from 2 to 3. Like, I think Cleveland is about 6 games or 7 games behind them from 2 to 3. So really, it's going to be the 1 versus 2. And I don't think the Celtics are going to, you know, necessarily be that worried about 1 versus 2. I think that they would much rather have a healthy Kyrie Irving. And obviously, you know, they've got guards who can fill in for him. Last night, Shane Larkin started, and you know they won comfortably. And again, that was the Bulls. Sorry, I broke my own rule. But the thing about the Celtics right now as they're built is Terry Rozier can get a bucket out of the pick and roll. He can, you know, create something for himself. Marcus Smart is the best defender, you know, aside from al-Horford, probably on the team. So these are very valuable guys who you can just plug in. You can give Kyrie the rest that he needs. So yeah, I do think that there's a good chance that, you know, last 10 games, if you're buying a Celtics ticket for the last 10 games and you're hoping to see Kyrie Irving, I would maybe tell you to save your money and try to maybe catch him next year, because I think there's a very legitimate chance that he might be sitting.
So as we start to sort of look ahead to, all right, we're kind of getting an idea of what the Celtics are going to be heading into the postseason, what is your current state of the Celtics?
So I think they're really good again, which is encouraging for Celtics fans. Obviously, the Raptors are going to be a big challenge. The Cavaliers obviously loom, you know, over everything with LeBron James. But I think that, you know, once again, you can kind of look back, maybe not at the team that won 16 in a row, but at that team, you know, right after that, where there was kind of this expectation that they were going to win games. And you could see as the All-Star break approached that they were really wearing down. They were really tired. But there is still that, you know, this team can defend like crazy, and they've got a lot of different offensive options, and that's fun to watch, and it's kind of fun to see how everything works together. Jaylen-Brown last night, we didn't even talk about him. He had 21 points, 9 for 13 from the field. He's really starting to show, you know, the star potential that the Celtics were hoping to see from him with that number 3 pick. You know, he's just got that kind of two-way presence that they're really missing. And you know, when you can combine the offensive options of Kyrie Irving and Jaylen-Brown, and then even what Tatum can bring you, plus al-Horford just kind of making everything better. A strong bench that's been playing really well since the All-Star break, which is not something that, you know, you maybe expected to say early in the season. Team's looking really good. I think that once again, you're kind of talking about a team where Eastern Conference Finals is where you would, you know, where you would hope to be, especially, you know, depending on seeds, but that's where you would hope to be, and then, you know, maybe you can look on ahead to, you know, something maybe a little bit more. Yeah, and when they were getting the pre-All-Star break stretch, there was definitely a period where the Celtics had
weirdly more games played than a lot of the other teams compared to them. Do you think the schedule is going to be less rigorous as it goes towards the stretch run?
Yeah, undoubtedly. I think Kyrie was talking about that before the All-Star break. That I think it was like just a huge gap for them where everything just kind of gets a little bit easier. They can take a breath, and they need that because, like you said, before the All-Star break, I mean, especially in the young guys, you could really see it in Jason Tatum that he was missing all his shots. He just looked winded a lot of the time, and it's tough, man. Like, it's an 82-game season. You're playing against the greatest players in the world every single night. Like, it's a grind, and they had an extra grind because they had that week off around London. So I'd be curious to know if they regret taking that extra time, or if they're kind of okay with it at this point. But yeah, I do think that there's going to be sort of a period where they can relax. They can maybe not totally relax, but where they can at least heal up a little bit before the postseason really kicks into gear.
All right, so that's the current state of the Celtics. We'll be checking in with Tom and Jay and all of our Celtics coverage going down the road as we get ready for this playoff run. All right, thanks, folks, for tuning in, and make sure to follow along with Tom at Tom_NBA.
Yeah, do that.
Yeah, it's a good thing if you like weird basketball Twitter, and also good basketball Twitter.
Absolutely.
Thanks, folks.